Today we're digging into something really tough, a topic with incredibly deep roots in Scotland's industrial past, mesothelioma. It's a devastating disease that shows up decades after exposure and, well, the fight for justice is a story that absolutely needs to be told. So, let's get right into it.
You know, this quote just hits you right in the gut. Just imagine, you work your entire life, you're building ships, you're building the country's future, and you have no idea that the very air you're breathing is basically a time bomb, a death sentence that won't go off for 30, 40, maybe even 50 years. It's truly a hidden killer.
So what is mesothelioma exactly? It is a brutal, aggressive form of cancer. And here's the thing you gotta get. It has no other significant cause. It's pretty much just asbestos. The prognosis is absolutely grim. Most people only survive for about 1 to 2 years after they're diagnosed.
Now, this isn't some random tragedy that just happens anywhere. It has a very specific geography. Scotland, believe it or not, has one of the highest rates of mesothelioma in the entire world. And the reason why, well, it's written all over its history.
And this is where it all connects. Just think about the Clyde shipyards. They were symbols of Scottish pride and power, right? But they were also epicenters of asbestos use. We're talking about everyone from laggers and plumbers to joiners and electricians being exposed to this stuff, day in and day out. And the truly heartbreaking part, the danger didn't stop when the whistle blew. Workers would unknowingly carry these deadly fibers home on their clothes, leading to what's called secondary exposure, affecting their own families.
Mesothelioma isn't the only threat here. You've also got asbestosis, which causes severe scarring in the lungs, and pleural thickening, which literally restricts your ability to breathe. And this brings up a really key difference in Scottish law. Since 2009, pleural thickening has been recognised as an actionable injury in Scotland, something you can get compensation for. That's not the case everywhere else in the UK.
Okay, let's shift gears and talk about the legal fight. Because for decades, getting any kind of compensation was, well, it was nearly impossible. Even though employers knew about the dangers, victims and their families were faced with this massive, seemingly unsolvable puzzle.
And here's the shocking part. This was not a secret. The risks were officially recognized for decades. I mean, look at this. Regulations existed as early as 1931. By the 1960s, it was completely undeniable that employers had a clear duty of care to protect their workers. And their failure to do that? That was negligence, plain and simple.
So you're probably thinking, if the negligence was so clear, why was it so hard to win a case? Well, it all came down to one single impossible question: causation. Mesothelioma can be triggered by a single fiber, but which fiber? From which job? It was scientifically impossible to prove.
Let's just walk through a really typical story. Say a guy works in a shipyard in the 60s, then a factory in the 70s, and a construction site in the 80s. Decades later, boom, he's diagnosed. In court, he couldn't point to a single one of those employers and say, it was your asbestos that did this. And because he couldn't, any claim against multiple employers would just fail.
This horrible injustice went on for years and years, until one monumental legal case came along and changed absolutely everything. It was a breakthrough that finally unlocked the door to justice for thousands of victims.
This is it, the Fairchild exception from 2002. And it was a total game changer. The court basically said, you know what? You don't have to prove which specific employer's fiber caused the cancer. Instead, if an employer negligently exposed you, and in doing so, materially increased the risk of you getting the disease, then they are liable. It's like trying to figure out which single snowflake started an avalanche. It's impossible. So Fairchild said, we're going to hold everyone who contributed to the danger accountable.
And the difference this made? It was literally night and day. Before Fairchild, your claim fails. After Fairchild, your claim can succeed, and all the negligent employers can be held responsible together. This completely transformed the entire legal landscape for mesothelioma.
And the law didn't just stop there. A few years later, the Compensation Act of 2006 came along and cemented this victory. It makes sure that a victim can get their full compensation from just one of the responsible employers. This is huge because it protects them from being left with nothing if, say, another one of the companies has gone out of business.
But okay, what happens if you can't trace the old employer or find their insurer? A civil claim isn't always an option. Thankfully, there are other safety nets in place for people in that situation.
The first big one is called the Diffuse Mesothelioma Payment Scheme, or DMPS for short. It was set up back in 2014. So,
Who is this for? Well, it's a lifeline for people who are negligently exposed but just can't track down the company or its insurer to sue. It provides a really substantial lump sum payment, and it offers some real justice when the traditional legal path is completely blocked.
There's also an older scheme that gives another layer of support. It's the Workers' Compensation Act, which goes all the way back to 1979.
This one covers people with diseases like asbestosis whose old employer just doesn't exist anymore. Now, the payments are lower than what you might get from a civil claim, but it's a crucial safety net for people who would otherwise get absolutely nothing.
So when you pull it all together, you can really see the different ways people can get support. Civil claims are the biggest piece of the pie, for sure, but these government schemes, plus state benefits, like the Industrial Injuries Disablement Benefit, which gives regular payments if you're disabled by a work-related disease, all of it creates this vital, overlapping system of support.
And that brings us to our final and maybe the single most important message in all of this. When it comes to mesothelioma, every single day counts.
There is a stark 3-year time limit to make a claim. And you have to understand this. That clock starts ticking from the date of diagnosis, not from when you were exposed to asbestos all those decades ago.
So why the mad rush? First, it's to preserve the evidence from the person who is ill, to get their story down. But second, and most importantly, it's to try and make sure they get the compensation and the justice they deserve in their lifetime. The Scottish courts really get this. They can fast-track these cases and even grant interim payments to get immediate financial help to families.
So, after all that, after looking at the scale of this tragedy, the incredible legal battles, and the support systems now in place, what is the one thing you really need to remember?
It's this. There is hope, and there is help available. If you or someone you love in Scotland gets an asbestos-related diagnosis, please do not delay. Specialist legal advice can help you navigate this incredibly complex world. Don't assume it's too late, don't assume the old employer can't be found, and most of all, you absolutely do not have to face this alone.